Router table or shaper? Which should I choose? For a lot of woodworkers, a router table is a fairly familiar piece of equipment. A shaper, on the other hand, well, they can be quite daunting. For a router table, you might be spinning a router bit like this to make a small rebate or rabbet in the edge of a piece of timber. For the shaper, on the other hand, you might be spinning a cutter like this to do the same job. So why then use a shaper over a router table? So in this video, the first of a series of videos on the shaper, I'm going to try to get to the bottom of why you might use a shaper over a router table. So perhaps the best way to figure out whether a shaper is a piece of equipment that you might want in your shop is to go through the reasons why I use a shaper. Let's start with door jambs. I do a lot of doors and windows, a lot of oversized doors and windows. This is a piece of jamb section from a door that I'm working on currently. It's 9 feet long. It's, 5.5-ish inches by 3.5-ish inches. It has a 1.5 by 3/4 rebate on this side for glass, for glazing and stuff. This side is the door side, and it will have a 2.5 or 2 5/8 by 3/4 rebate run in there, and then a groove for seals. It's probably, I don't know, 30 or 40 pounds. And obviously with a router table, not only would you be hard pressed, certainly without in and out feed tables, to be able to run something this long and heavy through it, but also the power to be able to, machine this sort of stock on a router is probably going to be a very big ask. So that's one of the reasons that I run a shaper. One of the really big reasons for using a shaper over the router table is the fact that with the smaller diameter of the router bits, the cutters, where they exit the cut of the wood, they're almost at 90 degrees to the grains of the wood. So you tend to get a lot more tear out with that method for let's say a 10 mil deep cut over a shaper cutter with a much larger diameter, where when it's for the same cut, where it's actually exiting the timber, it's doing so on a far lesser angle to the grain of the wood, so it's less likely to tear it out. Another reason why the larger shaper cutters are so nice to use and you get such good results is the sheer mass, like the weight of these cutters. And even for an aluminum cutter head like this one, and this is probably on the larger side of an aluminum rebating head, but there is quite the mass compared to any smaller diameter router bits, etc. And due to that, there's less vibrations and less sort of flexing and so on. And the result is you get a much smoother finish, a much better finish. So just to clarify, I'm actually using a shaper with an 1.25" spindle in it. And you can actually get shapers with spindles as small as 1/2 inch in diameter. In my opinion, if you're going to a shaper that small, you're not really getting all the benefits that are afforded to you typically with a shaper. You're probably going to be spinning the same sort of diameter cutters pretty much as you can get with a router bit. That's not to say that a 1/2 or 3/4 inch shaper doesn't have its place. You may find that for your situation, having a smaller shaper set up perhaps for one job and one job only makes a lot of sense. And that's something that you really need to figure out for your own use. For this video though, I'm going to be talking about cutters that would typically fit on a spindle, say from 30 to 40 millimeters. This shaper has an 1.25 inch spindle in it. I can swap that out for anything up to, I think, a 50 millimeter diameter spindle. But for this video, all the cutter heads that I'm talking about are for an 1.25 inch spindle. Okay, so hopefully by now you're starting to get a good idea of whether or not a shaper would be a good fit for your shop. If so, stick around, because I'm going to now talk about the different types of cutter heads and what their pros and cons are. For many years, slotted collars were quite common in the industry, especially in small shops like mine. I don't actually have any slotted collars. I haven't even used them for probably 30 years or more. Thankfully, we have lots of options nowadays when it comes to cutter heads, and I don't miss the slotted collars. The first type of cutter head I'm going to look at that I do own is a braised carbide cutter head. And these are fantastic cutter heads. They're relatively affordable. If you buy good cutters with good carbide, they really do last a long time and give you a pretty good finish of cut. The downside, of course, to a braised carbide is the fact that what you buy is what you get. This one is also a braised carbide, and this is a crown molding pattern, or cornice for some of us. So this one, again, can't be changed. However, with my machine at least, I do have a tilting spindle, and I can always use just part of this cutter head to get the particular profile I need. So a little more flexibility there, but still fairly fixed. So that's the braised carbide cutter head, and definitely a good one. Typically, of course, they're all going to be steel heads, so that's in and of itself a really nice thing. The sheer mass is going to help give you a really nice cut. Another type of cutter head that you may be using, the insert type cutter heads. And with these insert type cutter heads, again, they're running more often than not a carbide insert, but this time they're not braised to the body itself. They are held in with a gib that locks the insert in place. In some cases, they can be adjusted slightly to change the cut, but more often than not, they're sort of fixed in place. Certainly things like these little scribers. So yeah, various different types of these insert cutter heads. This is a multi sort of head, if you like, from Zuani, and I can cut various different size rebates with this. I can cut tongue and groove with this. There's a bunch of different uses with that type of cutter head. So another benefit of this type of head is having the flexibility to change out, at least for some of these heads, change out the inserts for a slightly different profile. So this being a door cope and stick head, I can actually go from one type of profile to a different type without changing the head itself. It's just the insert that I change. So, and then you've got spiral type cutter heads like this with a series of inserts that are very, very sharp. It has a scriber on the top, or 3 scribers in this case. The way these are designed, they have a shear angle, so they do produce quite a nice cut. And of course, the nice thing is being able to, for a cutter head this tall, which is, I'm thinking, 3 inches, if I nick one of these, I can literally undo the screw, spin the cutter around 90 degrees, and be good to go. So that's a really, really handy one. Lastly, I'm going to talk about the Euro head. And this type of head has become quite popular. It's a very simple system, uses a gib in the middle that is basically a wedge shape. So it's a wedge shape with the grub screws here pushing it out and forcing the cutters out, so that there's really very little chance that that could ever come out in any sort of situation. You'd have to really do it wrong, I think, to set it up wrong to get that. Now the other nice thing about all these newer heads is that they are limited in just how much you can cut, or the feed rate, if you like. This is a similar head to the Euro head, but it doesn't actually have a limiter, a limiting cutter. And so the downside to this is that if you're feeding it by hand, feeding your material in by hand, you can potentially, if you feed too fast, end up with it pulling the material in. And hopefully it's only pulling the material in and not your hand. But that's the danger of that sort of head. And I would suggest with that head either using very low profile cutters, or in the case where I've got these quite large ones in there and I've just ground those to do my dominoes, I basically just set up the power feeder, and then my hands aren't anywhere near it, and it's way less likely to be able to pull any stock in. So, but for all the other Euro type heads like this one, so you can see it's based on the same sort of principle. And the nice thing about these, just like the old slotted collar heads, is the fact that I can buy blank knives and grind them myself. So, where I need to do a small run of material to match something, maybe it's a crown molding or just some bit of trim that, I can't just go to the hardware store and buy. Or perhaps it's a profile that you can buy, but you can only buy it in a paint grade material. So being able to grind something to match that profile, to run a small batch makes a lot of sense. And that's something that's easy to do with this type of head. Now, if you can't grind your own cutters, you don't have the ability to do that, it's easy enough. These cutters, for example, I've had ground by Whitehill Tools. There's also companies across North America that are able to grind these knives for you. So the pins that hold the cutters in the head in the exact position they need to be are all sort of universal. So that pretty much covers the different types of heads. In the next video, I want to go into more detail about what cutter heads you might want to start out purchasing, and then elaborate on that further and show you how to actually set the shaper up with those heads, and how to perhaps set the power feeder up and run the material. So if that interests you, if you think that a shaper is going to be in your future and you want to learn a little bit more about how to go about using them, then stay tuned, because the next video will be coming very soon. Thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe if you like this content, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.